The Uganda we want. Welcome to the program, The Uganda We Want. My name is Mulanzi Robert. I'm so honored and privileged once again to appear here in this program, The Uganda We Want. Thank you for watching Dream TV, BTV, and our listeners on Impact FM. Thank you so much. We as well have our viewers via our social media platforms, YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, Dream TV Uganda, Impact FM Uganda, BTV Uganda, and The Uganda We Want. So in case you have missed some of the people that we host in this show, please feel free to search on YouTube, The Uganda We Want, Dream TV Uganda, BTV Uganda, or Impact FM Uganda. You'll be able to watch some of these views and even this very program. If you want to listen to it again, to watch it again, still it will be uploaded for you to listen in and also share with your friends. So that would be grateful if you do that, and many people will get to know which kind of Uganda do we need. And I always ask you, is the Uganda we're in the Uganda you want? That's a question for you. And in case it's not the Uganda that you want, we always host people in this show who speak to you. And as you listen to them, I hope there is something you pick and say, okay, I am going to do that. And when I say you, I'm singularizing and as well pluralizing, whereby I talk about you who are in government. When our guests come here in this show, whatever they say, we hope that you policymakers, you planners of this country, you leaders of this country, you say, okay, he or she has said something. I think I need to sit down on the round table with my team and we work on it. Now, if it comes to you, a Ugandan, a citizen like me, okay, if you hear something that is very, very important, again, I hope you as well sit down with your family, sit down with everyone and say, I'm going to do this. And then if we all do that, the leaders and us, they lead, we will as well achieve a Uganda that all of us do envision. Well, today I'm joined by Professor Vincent Kakembo. He has welcomed us to his home, and we are so honored and privileged to have him join us on the Uganda One. Professor, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Could you please greet our viewers and our listeners?
Okay.
Yeah.
Viewers and listeners, it's a great privilege to talk to you, to interact with my interviewer and the entire audience this afternoon. Indeed, a privilege. I think this is the first time I do appear on Impact FM and
Dream TV.
Dream TV
BTV.
as well. BTV. So it's really a great honor and privilege.
Yeah.
Yes. My name is Vincent Kakembo. I'm currently a professor and vice chancellor, Mutesa I Royal University. That's the Kingdom University. It's a great privilege to be of service to Sabasaja's people and also to have the opportunity to share with you some perspectives, humble perspectives. I would like to thank my host here for arranging, affording me that opportunity to speak and interact with our viewers and listeners.
Yeah. Before you became a professor, I believe you went through what most of us have gone through, schools. I don't know if during your time you had nursery or kindergarten, like the way it is to us.
Yeah.
But it would be, good to credit such schools if they are still in existence.
Yeah.
Until, from, wherever you started from to where you are now. Just briefly, people get to know you. Who is Professor Kakembo Vincent?
Oh, yes. I would say my journey has been quite long, just like anybody else's journey. So it's been a long journey indeed, from really very humble beginnings. And I think my journey is that of inspiration to others. It means that you can become anybody from any background or any form of background. I didn't have the opportunity to go to nursery school. And at the time, when I was still young, it was considered really just a preserve of people who really are well off and so on. We just started off straight into school, P1. Yeah, but here we are. I went to primary school in the county of Mawokota, Sabasaja's county of Mawokota, quite close to Nkozi, Luunga Primary School. But initially, at the initial stage, my mother used to stay by the lakeside at Bukakata, and my auntie, in English we say auntie, but it's a mother. My mother that follows my biological mother was a teacher, and so I used to follow her to school. And I really happened to start school quite early, because whenever I would go with her to school, just helping how my cousin was a young baby, helping her to carry a flask for the child and other, needs for the child. I would really get to pick whatever they were teaching at school, whatever she was teaching. And they realized that even at the age of 4, I was already as good as the children who were already in school. So they said, why not take the child to school? And I started. But because it was still the junior school, then they decided to take me to a better school from our, ancestral area in Mawokota, the village of Migamba, Mawokota. There was a school by the name of Luunga. So then the school was still very strongly supported by government, because we had few schools, and of course, the population of the country tells it all that. Not many people had the privilege to go to school, and the private sector had not come into, the education sector that much. So therefore, our schools were in the villages were still very competitive. The headquarters where our school used to get educational materials were the headquarters of the district in PG. But we, as in the villages, we used to beat or compete favorably with the best of the schools, like Chisubi, Savio. We would beat them. It's not like now, whereby you would expect your urban schools to beat the rural ones. From there, proceeded to Kako Senior Secondary School, Masaka. My preference as a child was St. Henry's College, Chitovu. And actually, I'd been admitted by Father Aiden then. The kind of marks we would get were then like 294 out of 300. Wow. So I had been admitted at St. Henry's College, Chitovu. But my mother was advised that, given the close proximity of St. Henry's College, Chitovu to the town and so on, Nyendo, many children get spoiled, and they were advised, no, take her out of town to Kako. He will come out a disciplined child and concentrate more on studies. Well, that's the advice she got. And that's how I ended up at Kako. From Kako Secondary School, well, just after Kako Secondary School, that's when the war that toppled Idi Amin did prevail.
Oh,
that
so
was
we
about
are talking of
1978.
78,
Yeah.
79.
So infrastructure in such schools like Kako, St. Henry's College, Chitovu was destroyed during the war, to the extent that even furniture was used by army guys from Tanzania called Kakembo'S. They used it for cooking purposes. And so as a result, we ended up having to come to look for schools in Masaka. Even Masaka had been completely ravaged. I had to come to the city, went to Kololo High School then. Yeah, did my high school, no, that is HSC then, because I completed my O-level at Kako, and that's when war struck. Very devastating war. I came for HSC or higher education at at Kololo High
Kololo
School,
High
and then
School.
from there proceeded to Makerere University. From Makerere University, after my first degree, Uganda was a place that was really.
So the general election of 1980, you were at Kololo High, or you had joined?
Yes, I was at Kololo High, and I
Kololo
remember
High.
it quite well.
Okay.
Yeah, the two contestants were mainly, in terms of parties, were DP and UPC.
Yeah. Okay.
So, on completing Makerere University, Uganda really was unbearable, because staying in the city up to about 6 in the evening was abominable. I mean, one would be blamed for having done that. So immediately after university, I decided to leave Uganda for Nairobi, Kenya, where I worked briefly, and then found my way into South Africa. I've worked in South Africa and also continued with studies for about 35 years.
Wow.
Yes, it's been a lifetime.
I
would
could
say
see.
my productive lifetime has mainly been spent in South Africa, where I did another degree in BSc honors, and then went to do a BSc at Rhodes University. It's a replica of Oxford, because these two, Oxford in the UK and Rhodes University, quite close, and you'll find that even the staff is a very close partnership. I did my MSc or Master of Science there, and then finally a PhD. Then I worked at the then University of Port Elizabeth. That's on the east coast of South Africa. This University of Port Elizabeth later became Nelson Mandela University, where I have worked for more than 25 years. And then, but initially I also did work at the university, a university called Fort Hare University, one of the oldest universities in Africa, where your late the president of Uganda, Rule, went, the Njonjos of South Africa, the Mugabe's of even Nelson Mandela himself went to that prestigious and Fort Hare University. So I worked there, focusing in specializing in the area of geosciences, and then I proceeded to Nelson Mandela University, where I have been for the last 25 years, until I got the opportunity to come back to Uganda and serve my country for the very first time as Vice Chancellor, Mutesa the First Royal University.
Wow, Professor, it's an honor again for us to have you come and appear on the Uganda We Want and share the kind of Uganda that you envision. Looking at your experience, your background, where God has taken you through, I believe our viewers and our listeners are going to be impacted by your words and sharing your experience. There's a lot that is coming into my head after getting to know who you are, but we need to start from somewhere. There is always the first step.
For sure.
It looks like you've been in this field of education for quite some time.
Out of it.
And I'm really excited and anxious, actually, or even more eager to hear you speak to us about the education sector of our country, comparing it with where you've been, looking at how our children start school here to university where you are now. Is our education process, or is our education the education you envision for this country? If not, which kind of education do you envision for Uganda, Professor?
Indeed, that question derives certainly from the theme of the Uganda would want to see, the Uganda would want to develop. It's really $1 million question. You'll find quite a number of different perspectives people do have as to the sort of education system they want to see prevail in the country. And as I said at the very beginning, it's really a great honor to really share my perspectives with the viewers on the education system here and so on. I've had the privilege of going through the education system in Uganda, and then also for some time the education system in Kenya. I also, maybe one other area I didn't point out because I stayed there for a short time, was a country in Southern Africa called Lesotho, and then proceeded to South Africa. So I have that that background, as you were. Yes, I have the privilege to have that sense of comparison between the education systems. Yes, I must say the education system in Uganda was, as we all know, was by and large based on the British, or modeled on the British system. But although there was a very strong colonial element to it, so much so that I've been to Europe many times, I've worked there many times, I've studied there. But when I get there, or wherever I've traveled in the world, I find that there's nothing new to me. I mean, the education system I went through here did emphasize. It was quite outward, such that whatever we studied about the outside world, when I got there, it's like I knew almost everything about it. You go to the Canadian prairies, you already know on paper what you should to expect. So it wouldn't surprise you, right? So,
Professor, are you saying that the education that the British brought here was more of forecasting their side more than focusing on us?
In a way, so to speak, the education was not that much introverted. It was outward focusing in a way. It tended to focus more on the outside world. So much so that we really even didn't get to know what was on the ground. There was a tendency to focus on their environment more than our local ones. It was only much later that scholars here realized the need to even explore our local environment more than was the case. You would speak about studying the Rhinelands. You talk about, we've been going to China, you just look at the Yangtze River Valley and so on. We did all this. I've already talked about the Canadian prairies. I've been stayed in South Africa for a long time, but when I got there, there's really like nothing I didn't know about South Africa. We studied about the PWV region, the Rand productive area, and so on and so forth. They kept Cape Town as the mother city where the white people studied. So, in a way, our local environment was not very well explored. And it is only later that scholars here in Uganda started churning out, publications specifically focusing on our local environment. And it's only then that we started even understanding our own physical environment, our own socio-economic settings and all that. Yes. But in terms of the education we would want to see, it's really, as I said, $1 million question. We should really start getting or moving away from the colonialized education, colonially based education. We need to focus on the sort of education that is responsive to the needs of our people, that points more in the direction of solving our own local problems. You will study in high school and, okay, there's a need for comparison, but you get to focus more on like, for example, the Manhattan Island. You go there, with the way we studied it, you already know what old Manhattan is all about and so on.
Tennessee Valley Authority.
Yes. But you wouldn't get to understand your local environment and how about going about developing it and that sort of thing. So, if really I am to talk about our education system here, what hurts me more is that we thought that we would become a lot more intelligent by focusing on a more of examination is the best education.
A more
More of an examination based. What I mean in that regard is that yes, we would do our primary school, do our so-called PLE, primary living education. You proceed, do your A levels, and then go to university. All the time, it's been more focused on passing examinations.
Yeah.
Do your individual thing. Cram, or study long hours, focus more on what you would call rote learning. Rote learning, whereby you focus more on cramming, do very well on the examinations, and you are uploaded for having passed highly.
Yeah.
And then
these people bring their cameras.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He got 19, 20,
yes,
18.
Absolutely.
He's the best.
Yes.
But you give him a camera, don't know how to operate it.
But as I told you earlier on, our education during our years was mainly government or public supported. It was government providing everything. But when I left Uganda, a new, you call it a paradigm shift took place, whereby the private sector now came in quite strongly. During our times, a private school was considered inferior, and that was the case. It was a person who would fail to make it to a public school, they would go to a private school, and actually their education was inferior. But when I left, and now that I'm back, what I do realize is that the private sector has now taken over the education system in the country.
So do you think, Prof, is that good for a country, so for the country's education system or sector to be taken up by private sector?
Indeed, and that's a very good question. And that was really the point I was getting to.
Yeah.
Is it good? Yes, because the private sector has also assisted the government in, closing the gaps. Because I don't think government would have been in position to cope with the expansion of the education needs, because it means that as the population of the country grew, or as it grows, it also means that government had to keep pace with providing, the amenities required by way of building schools and so on. You've tried, but yes, the rate at which the population has grown has outpaced government. But when the private sector came in, on the flip side of it, or the unfortunate side of it, is that education has turned out to be highly commercialized. And part of the result, or this has resulted mainly into your commercialization, is turned into unfair competition. What is that unfair competition? Every school is out to beat the other, in simple terms, to outturn the other, to perform better than the other school.
Okay. So,
and the unfortunate outcome of that has been that schools are, this is my own view, schools have, turned to turning our children into objects. Objects to beat their competitors. When you beat your competitors, it means you're doing so well, and then that means that you are highly marketable, and then you'll be getting more students and grow, and of course realize more profits and so on.
Okay. So we think that the more the numbers are in the school, and the more they appear in the news for performing well, as they say, okay, I need to take my child there. Now, the quality of it, you're saying, is no longer an issue now.
Essentially, that's what it has literally translated into. I feel so bad when I have to leave very early in the morning for meetings somewhere. We have, for example, certain meetings, sometimes not at university, but we do have meetings at, for example, my bosses, at Mango, we have meetings which sometimes start at 7 in the morning and so on. But you already find children hitting the road, they're going to school when it's still dark, 6, 5:30. And then you try to comprehend what this is all about.
So
when you think
Professor,
about it, you get to realize that these children are just being compelled to do that. Go to school so early in the morning. There is a highly competitive environment. That school wants to beat the other. You see these children having to go to school even over the weekend. Not because there's so much they need to be doing, but they are being turned into objects. To just like for that school to remain competitive and just beat their immediate competitors. And hence for the subsequent year, there will be the school of preference by teachers. So turning the education system more into an examinations-based system at the expense of the national needs. For example, what we're focusing on at the moment, education that focuses on skilling our children more than turning them into examination objects. And that's what the country needs. And that's what our country needs to see, to be, and that's the sort of Uganda we need.
Skilled.
And then, it's an education that turns children who are not able to perform so well in examinations, they're perceived as useless children or failures in society.
If you see them in carpentry, if you see them in welding, if you see them in plumbing, those are failure. Sometimes your career of teaching, you say, if you have failed at O level, go into teaching. You go and be a teacher. But Prof, allow me to take you back briefly. There is a point you brought in, like the coming of the private sector into the education system. You say, yes, it is good, but the flip side of the coin, we see that the private sector has commercialized our education here in Uganda. And that is true. You say the truth.
I want to stand by that.
My question comes to you and help us understand this. Don't you think somewhere, somehow, the government or the leaders or the education sector or ministry, not sector, ministry, failed to regulate the private sector? And they let them fly the way they want?
Well, as I say, and as I pointed out at the beginning, I've not been around for quite some time. 35 years is a long time to be away. But I've been following developments in the country. Yes, government has tried to put in place a regulatory framework where they've tried to regulate education. But still you realize that there are lots of contradictions. You'll find that people who find themselves in within this or setting this regulatory framework find themselves having to be compromised because they also have interests in the private sector of education. You find that they also do own schools. And you wouldn't want to, shoot yourself in the foot.
I don't know if you saw a story that came up in one of our newspapers here in the country. I did a show on Impact FM about education, and I was talking about when this, we have just elected this, the leaders who have been leading from 2021, to 2026, and I talked about, because I was so saddened, the way you were saddened about seeing kids at 5. They are taking them to school. A child of 3, a child of 2.5, a child of 4, 5, heading to school at 5. Some of them, they wake them at 4:30. They're already awake. And the minister of state in charge of education, actually primary education, came up and put up the guidelines that, all nursery schools must start their education at 8. It has been now 4 to 3 years, nothing has ever been done. And I saw a few days ago another story that, okay, the government has put up new rules on schools. And they were saying nursery should begin at 8 and they must stop at midday or midday. But the question comes to us, looking at where you have been, this is South Africa or Kenya, if the ministry comes up, if the government comes up and says something, here, I'm reporting to you where for the time you've not been here, what is being done is we don't actually obey that. We don't actually follow that. It's like the government should do whatever they want to do, and then we are doing what we want to do. And that's a very big problem. How can we address that? Is that the same experience you've watched over in South Africa, in Kenya? How is it done there? And contrary to what is being reflected here?
Yes, true. As I pointed out earlier, the whole aspect really does come up from this sort of conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest.
People do have. So much so that because of that commercialization, even our curricula have been turned upside down. How do I get to know that? While still in South Africa, I would come regularly to visit Uganda with our children, who are now big people already, professionals. But they would come, would stay with relatives who also had children of the same age. You get to realize that the children of our relatives, who are what you call your primary 2, primary 3 here, are talking about issues far advanced, talking about, say, parts of an insect, the thorax, abdomen, and so on and so forth. The children of the same age, our children would come with from South Africa, would have no idea of what they were talking about.
Wow.
Our children at that stage would be still doing their drawings and that kind of thing. So the sense I got, and I correctly saw, was that the system of education in South Africa was stepwise phased in, not rushing children into what they were not supposed to be learning. Actually, that's still the case. Now, here, when the commercialization of education crept in, what people here did was to start bringing aspects of the curriculum to a lower level where they were not meant to be. Some of that the National Curriculum Development Center will tell you here that some aspects of the curriculum which are being taught at a much lower level are not supposed to be there. You're smuggled in. How? It's the commercialization to give an impression to parents that, now you see, my school is a lot more advanced. The children know more about such, advanced aspects of science and other aspects of society at a much more early stage of life. And therefore, my school is more advanced than the other. Those are the nitty-gritties that our regulatory, our regulatory framework didn't consider. And as a result, as it went on, you'd realize that by the time the child goes to primary leaving examination, they're more oriented in an examination passing mode at the expense of the practical skills-based, side of things. That is one way. But again, just going back to the comparison of education system, the education system in South Africa is more of a phased-in kind of, stepwise process. Children or learners are meant to be doing the right thing at their respective hierarchical levels. Now, here in Uganda, what I do realize, and even other countries in South Africa do appreciate this, like South Africa, they do appreciate the kind of knowledge our students, get at high schools. How do they get to appreciate that? many, parents seek higher education in South African universities. I must say, the South African universities are highly advanced, highly resourced. And I think that's why parents prefer. So a child or a student goes to a South African university with, good grounding in terms of theoretical knowledge.
But the practical knowledge
part is lacking, and exposure is lacking. And that's why you see that in South Africa, higher education is better off because they're better resourced. They are better off in the hands-on, practical-based education, and so on. When your child, I still call them children, a student goes to higher education in South Africa, they will be found wanting in many the practical approach to things. And many a time they are compelled to have maybe do a year later and so on, that kind of thing. Yes, some of them have excelled, but they also do tell you what they lacked at the earlier level. Comparing themselves with their South African counterparts. Yes.
Yeah. So, Professor, well, you brought in again something else that in the 5 minutes that we have to close off this episode, and our viewers will always have the professor here, Professor Kakembo, to come, and share his experience, his knowledge, and his perspective. But before we close off this episode, who needs to do what to make sure that now we have our education that is focused on the, giving our students the practical knowledge and the theoretical knowledge. We have been so much we are so much bending on the theoretical
side of it, and the practical, not so much. So who needs to do what in order that we achieve that? Because maybe in the next episode, we'll talk about, let's say, does our education give the moral fiber to our students? And so we'll go into those details. We have a new curriculum for O-level, the competence-based one. Maybe in the next episode, I will have to ask you if your view on that. But for now, who needs to do what? At least we need a take home. Who needs to do what? Who needs to do what?
Yes,
I'm happy. Thank you very much for that question. I'm happy you asked that sort of question. When I'm really now an active player, a participant in the Ugandan education system, I do appreciate efforts by government to introduce that new element of the competence-based curriculum into the country. I would want to refer to that as a game changer. And in direct response to your question as to who should do what, I'm really happy that the government has seen that, has identified the need to introduce a paradigm shift in our education system by introducing the competence-based curriculum. Just again, comparing it to South Africa, we started there, the government started there what is called the outcomes-based curriculum.
Outcomes-based curriculum.
Yes, they used to call it OBE, outcomes-based education. And it was really focusing more on not only the practical side of things, but what the learner can do, how the learner can lead the learning process. And you as a teacher would be coming in as a facilitator, learning to discuss with their friends, doing group work, doing practical exercises together, thinking out of the box, and maybe also using technology to come up with new things or build on what is existing. And this is the direction the outcomes-based education is headed. Yes, you now start seeing a situation whereby now, judging from the results of like your O-level education, the O-level exams we've just had lately, you start realizing that your rural counterpart, your rural student, is able also to come out to do well in the examination because they've been able to demonstrate what they're capable of delivering from a practical, perspective. It's not only, they're not judged only by what they're able to do in the examination. And because of the commercialization of education, particularly in the urban environment, you realize that this, for the first time, your urban schools did not come out tops. Am I right in saying that? Yes. So to speak, it means that we're now going back to the old times whereby we people who studied in the rural environments, in the rural schools, would beat our urban counterparts. And I hope this pattern will persist. I hope it really doesn't get manipulated by the commercializers of education. You see, you come up with something new, they also do come up with something new.
You plan as they plan.
In Uganda, they say, akufumbire yebigere omutwe. So now, people are intent on commercializing education. And you even now start hearing parents pointing out that, so now I may not necessarily take my child to school whereby I have to pay 4 million. I can even take them to a school where I can pay 1 million or 500 and then they will perform well. Commercializers of education don't want to hear that. They see themselves as they see that as a threat.
You're kicking them out of business.
And the first thing they start thinking, how do I now pay for that building, that 10 billion building that I've just, for which I've borrowed the money from the bank.
From the bank, yeah.
That's why I said that they will now start coming up with new ways. But I would say that, yes, who should do what? That's a good start of just coming up with a competence-based curriculum. So much so that even us who are at university, I now as Vice Chancellor, we have identified the need, and actually we've been compelled to build in strong elements of the curriculum-based education in our university.
Even at university level.
We have to do that because now, for example, in your faculty of education, the teachers who churn out are the people who are going to be teaching, children.
They must be competent best.
Absolutely, we have to be exposed to that. But even in other areas, whether it's not teachers who are churning out, your people in business and management, they really need to know that whatever they teach, whatever they also, how they improve themselves, has to be responsive to the needs of the business community, to industry and so on. We get into partnership with the business. Even when we're developing our curricula, we're in partnership with the business. So what we develop as our curricula are geared towards addressing the needs of community. At Mutesa, the first Royal University, our flagship programs are like engineering. And constantly we are getting into partnership with the industry, with the business, so much that the sort of programs we teach, or the kind of curriculum we have, just address the needs of the community. And many of them we will develop them in partnership with the industry, and even some short courses, we again run them side by side with these people. We're lucky that this outcomes-based curriculum is not coming up as something totally new. When you look at, for example, I've given an example of engineering, your IT, it's not something new. These people have been approaching teaching from a practical perspective. And when we introduce this to our lecturers, we've held many workshops. The lecturers are quick to tell you that with us from engineering, IT, fine art and design, and so catering and hotel management, all that is not new to us because we're practical based in our approach and so on. So, but anyway, that is the sort of Uganda we want to see. We want to see Uganda whereby the education system is skills based. Each child comes out of high school, university with a specific set of skills, so that, let me give you a quick example.
Yeah, give me that and we sign out.
When I went out of Uganda and I started my work in Lesotho and even South Africa, who would look for work, but you would go to an interview and you'd be beaten by your counterpart like from India because they were mouth-skilled. You would find that, okay, he did economics, but then again, he can do plumbing, you can do this and that. And we thought that Indians were crooks, or they were you call them crafty. That's what we thought. Not knowing that their education, the setting was such that it was skills-based. And that's the sort of education we want. Education that emphasizes apprenticeships. I've seen this in Germany, you know. They focus not much on your examinations-based education, but what each student is able to do practically, and so you can then improve yourself to hierarchies as time goes on. But yes, I would have loved to speak more about general aspects of what the kind of Uganda would want to see.
We will get time, definitely.
Yes.
Our viewers and our listeners, of course, we are time bound, and we need to get out of here. But Professor Vincent Kakembo is his perspective on education is to see the Uganda where our education produces to us people who have a set of skills. In other words, I've had something in their circles, you know, of university education. They call it a holistic approach to education. He will talk about that next time. When I have what do they mean by holistic kind of education and a holistic person who is well trained. He will tell us more about that. Professor, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And we wish you all the best at where your role is, and as you're actively playing a key role in education. We pray that people will embrace what you say, not negatively criticize what you're saying, because what you're saying is to build a nation, and you've started from the education sector. So next time when you have him, we'll go into other things, but for now, allow us to sign out. Thank you so much for your time, and we say bye-bye.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Saba Saja Kabaka Awangale.